So with that, I'm very grateful for the classes of 1955 in allowing us to bring in and welcome Dr. Ken Ginsburg.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I have to tell you, I've had a great day so far. First of all, your 8th graders were amazing. They were like so engaged, and you never know with 6th through 8th graders, you never know what's going to happen. But it ended up feeling really, really great. But what made me really happy was the different meetings I've had with administrators and parents. And what's really clear to me is, sometimes I go to schools. First of all, can you hear me? So sometimes I go to schools, and it's my job to change the way they think, because the way they think is really harmful for children, all right? And sometimes I go to schools that has it all right philosophically. And then my job is to just serve as a catalyst and make sure that people kind of buy into what the school's already doing. The good news is it's that category here. Everything I've heard about how they think about the whole child and how they think about success so far, everything I've heard is right. That doesn't mean that everyone in the world is going to agree with you. And it doesn't mean that your child is not going to be exposed to some messages in the world that might undermine their long-term success. So we're here really thinking about what long-term success looks like. A couple other housekeeping points. I'm going to be talking till about 9 o'clock. I couldn't listen to anybody for an hour and 45 minutes. I really couldn't without moving around. So if you're somebody who wants to move around, take a break at any time, run up and down the sides, I think that's great. All right? And the other thing, I just want to get a sense. Who has kids who are in elementary school or younger? Nice. So a lot of times what will happen is that people, because they know I'm an adolescent doc, the younger folks won't show up. And actually, if you want to make healthy adolescence, when do you begin? Like when they're 2, right? So this message, you're actually here at the exact right time. So let's begin and think. How do we define success? What are the things that you want for your child to be or to have in order to be successful? Name for me some things. Happiness. Give me another. Balanced. Confidence. Good relationships. Some other stuff. Emotional regulation. Passion. Say what? Resilience. Thank you for that. So the point is that what we have to know is when we're looking at our child, whether they're 3 years old or whether they're 18 years old, we have to really be keeping our eye on the ball. And we have to stop looking at the child before us and begin looking at the man or woman that's coming. Look at the 35-year-old. And when you really begin doing that, and you begin parenting to raise an adult who's going to make a difference in the world, and an adult who's going to be happy in the world, then suddenly the pressures that are on you during elementary school and get worse and worse through high school begin to dissipate. And you begin to realize that the messages that the other folks are saying aren't actually right. Okay, so now let's think about that healthy 35-year-old. We want them to be happy, but it's very different than in childhood. When you want your 4-year-old to be happy, you give them a cookie. When you want your 12-year-old to be happy, you give them a bike. When you want your 16-year-old to be happy, you give them a car, and you absolutely positively should not. Okay? But it's easy to make kids happy. What is a happy adult? A happy adult is someone who has the passion. Someone who has a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning in life. What else do we need that adult to be? We need them to be hardworking, to have tenacity, to have grit. Are you up on this word grit that we've been talking about for the last 5, 6 years? It is, what it basically says, bottom line is this. You're either going to see life as a sprint, or you're going to see it as a marathon. And when you see it as a sprint, then you run really fast to a goal right in front of you. You'll do whatever it takes to get to that goal, including cheating, including stepping on people. And we know that this generation of elite kids are cheating at higher levels than other kids have. We know that. Okay? And what else? When you fall down and you're running a sprint, what happens to you? You've lost. When you're running a marathon, you're not even sure you can make it. You're thinking far in the distance. You're training for a very long time to really think about getting to a place where most people can't imagine getting. And then when you fall down, what happens when you run a marathon? Nothing. You get back up. What else do we want? We want our kids to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to look at a human being, and when something's going wrong with their life, rather than look at them and say, what's wrong with you? to look at that human being and say, how do I lift you up? What's going on with you? We want that kind of empathy in our kids. We want kids who are going to be creative and innovative, because all of the best ideas haven't been thought of now. And if you look at industry right now and you look at what they're worried about, is that most schools are still teaching kids in terms of knowledge. And the whole movement of testing for the test is knowledge-based. And knowledge doesn't get you very far anymore. Now it is about innovative thought, it's about creativity, it's about changing paradigms. That's what it's about. It's about knowing how to access information. When I graduated medical school, you had to know everything, because if you didn't know it, you had to look it up on Index Medicus, you had to go to the library. It was really, really hard. You had to know things. Now, I take out my phone all the time to give me answers. That's good medicine, because I have to know how to navigate that system. But we need kids to be creative and to be innovative thinkers. We need kids to be able to be collaborative, to be able to work with other human beings, because you never come up with ideas on your own. And we need kids who are going to know what they're good at and what they're not good at, so I can go, you know what? This one's on you. Let me take the back seat right now and learn from you. We need kids who are going to be coachable, who are going to be able to take constructive criticism. Because if you can't take constructive criticism, you will fail in the workplace. And we need kids who are going to be resilient. Because as much as you'd like to protect your kid from everything, it's just not possible. It's just not possible, right? So what you want is to prepare them to be able to navigate the waters. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to try to build a case for, not everything here is going to be about stress and academic stress, but about half of tonight's going to be. And I'm going to build a case, I believe, that the normal treadmill that most of these kind of schools are on are actually undermining the future adults in a very big way. And if you don't believe me, call industry, ask them about what it's like to work with the 20-somethings right now, the 20-somethings who have been to the top schools, and they will tell you that they are very, very anxious, and that when they don't do well, and if you give them constructive criticism, they fall apart, and you hear from their mothers. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. All right? So, do we have to make a choice between play, success, and happiness? Let me tell you, my girls are freshmen now in college, and I've been talking about this kind of stuff for like a decade. And I want you to know that when college admissions came along, I was really nervous, and I was really like, I hope I didn't screw up. Because there's no question that the decisions I made might have prevented them from going to Harvard. Not that they would have wanted to go, not that they would have gotten in. But if you parent in the way that I'm suggesting, it is possible, let me be straight to you, that your kid won't get into Stanford, because Stanford is really right now about keeping their admissions below 6%. That's what it's about. Your anxiety is really good business. Really, really good business for them. And so, but if I had to make a choice between success, long-term, and happiness for my kids, hands down, I would have chosen success. I would have held my nose doing it, but I would have chosen success, because they're only on my watch for 18 years, and then, God willing, they're going to have another 102 years here, right? I would have chosen success, without a doubt, but what I know is that that is a false choice, all right? So what does getting into a top college get you? What getting into a top college gets you factually is your first job. That's what it does, all right? And how long is this generation of kids staying at their first job, do you know? So it's a little bit less than 2 years. It's 18 months to 2 years. What gets you your second job? Yeah, it's your first job, right? So does that second boss call the first boss and say, how did she do in her ACTs? Did she make captain of the lacrosse team by senior year? Did she play the bassoon, right? So what are the questions that they're asking? Does she work with others? Is she coachable? Does she learn on the job? And that's about taking constructive criticism. Is she creative? Right? These are the ideas. The very pressure that we are putting on some of our most elite kids is actually undermining all of these ingredients you need for long-term success. So hold your breath, and as other parents are telling you, don't you want to make sure he gets into? Say, actually, I'm wanting him to find the right match, but I'm really wanting him to be a successful adult. Boom. End of conversation. All right? Now play. All right? So let's talk about kindergarten for a minute. All right? Let's talk about childhood. Does play teach you creativity, innovation, how to get along with others, when to step out, how to take constructive criticism? Damn straight. So when we think that we have to get ahead right now when the kid's in kindergarten and undermine what every mammal does to figure out how to grow, which is play, we are really hurting our kids in a big way, in a very big way. Let's move on. Let's talk about resilience now. Resilience is about the ability to overcome adversity. It's about the capacity to bounce back. To understand what it is, you have to understand that it is a mindset. It's about how you think, all right? To understand resilience, you have to understand stress. Stress is about the fact that we all come from the jungle. We all come from the jungle, and everything that we feel when we're nervous is about the fact that we are designed to be able to run from a tiger or a wolf pack. That is how we are designed. And so many things happen in our bodies to make us survive. So one of the things that happens is our heart beats fast. We get stomach cramps. We'll explain why later. There's all these things that happen so that you can survive. Your pupils get big so you can jump over a log if it's dark. All of these things are designed to help you survive. One of the other things that happens when you are running from a tiger is you're not supposed to have very effective communication with that tiger. Really, can we work it out? Right? You are supposed to be running. And what actually happens is that the blood leaves the part of your brain that is the thinking part of your brain into the part of your brain that is the frog part of your brain that says slither, jump away. Have you ever had the experience of going blank? Going blank is literally the blood going whoosh to frog brain. So if your child believes that an AP bio test will determine his life, don't be surprised when frog brain gets turned on and he goes blank. So the mindset of resilience is about knowing what is a real tiger versus a paper tiger, with the bottom line being, if it can't chew your face off, it's not a real tiger. All right? Resilience is uneven. You can have a kid who is a complete bear at home, like incredibly difficult, but part of the reason is that he's a perfect little boy at school. You can have difficulties at home, and as a result, that kid is going to be a perfect little boy at home because he doesn't want to stress anybody out. He doesn't want you to be disappointed in him, and then all of a sudden you're going to hear he's awful at school. Resilience is not invulnerability. So I've written textbooks on how to make kids resilient. I've written parenting books on how to make kids resilient. I've raised 2 kids who are now 19. Are they invulnerable? No. It's not the same thing. Let's go back to the beginning of the definition of success. We wanted our kids to be empathetic, to be warm and compassionate. Can we agree on that? Where do you get that from? Is that a genetic trait? You get that from experience, right? In my own life, we all have our own lives. In my own life, I've had an amazing life. I'm 53, an amazing life. The only thing that happened that it was bad for me was 17. When I was 17, I was really incredibly depressed and really kind of passively suicidal. I wanted to die all the time. Never did anything, but wanted to. And who did I go to for help? Who do you think? Nobody. Nobody, because I was funny, so I could lie about it, and nobody knew. Because it was 1979, and it wasn't cool to have these thoughts and feelings. What have I done with my life? I've lifted teenagers up. I create national policy on how to decrease shame and stigma in organizational policy, on how to decrease shame and stigma among kids. Thank God for 17, right? So for those of you who have kids who are particularly anxious, who sometimes are depressed, who really are full of emotions, and it's really hard sometimes to parent them, congratulations. Because did you really want to raise a kid who didn't feel? Adolescence is a time where when you have intense feelings, it can be overwhelming until you learn to manage them, but those are the people who end up being the most successful people in the world. So this is not our goal, invulnerability. It's managing. Resilience isn't a character trait. It's not something you're born with. It's something that's supported by supports and circumstances in your life. I can tell you everything we know about resilience while standing on one foot. 60 years of resilience research. The kids who make it are the kids who have had at least one adult who believe in them unconditionally and hold them to high expectations. Who's that adult supposed to be? That's supposed to be you. What does unconditional belief mean? Is that like, dude, it's okay to do drugs? It's not what I'm talking about. It's I'm not going anywhere. You can rely on my presence. You are not a bumper sticker in my car or a reflection of me. I am there for you, and you can count on it no matter what. What does high expectations mean? Is that about grades? Is that about trophies? Is that about how many dance recitals you get? Absolutely not. What every kid needs is a human being who knows them, who sees them, for whom they're not invisible. If you see your child in terms of what they produce instead of who they are, that is not unconditional belief, and you are not doing what ideally you should be doing as a parent. As a parent, you should be building their character. There is only one person who knows how delicious your kids are, and that's you. So when you look at like my kids, I have identical girls, they're 19. They're the girls, and so during the adolescent years we had moments. They were great, but we had moments. But let me tell you who they are. They're the little girls who stopped by the side of the road and picked up the pink teddy bear to give it a teddy bear bath. They're the girls who wouldn't let us turn off the lights in the summertime in the house because there were moths inside, and they were worried that the moths would get lost. So we had to turn off the inside lights, turn on the outside lights, and walk the moths out with flashlights so they could be with their moth grandmas. That is how delicious my girls are. And the fact that I know them, really know who they are, means that during the worst of times I hold them to that expectation of the beauty inside of them. That is what every child needs. When you get your kids turned into adolescents, and you begin talking about high-yield conversations, and I want to make sure they're not doing drugs, I want to make sure that they're not having sex, I want to make sure that they get into a top college, then you begin talking about what they do or what they produce instead of who they are, and you as parents are the most protective people in the life when you know who they are. All right? That's everything there is about resilience. The rest is commentary. All right? But we have another hour and a half, so let's keep going. This is the American Academy of Pediatrics model in resilience. This is my model. It has been stolen largely from the youth development folks. But the first thing we need is we need kids to have confidence. And we knew exactly how to give kids confidence. We had the self-esteem movement. All right? So what did the self-esteem movement look like? We wanted to make sure that every kid felt really, really good about themselves. So what did that look like? So the first thing that we did is we taught teachers how to praise them incessantly. So the first thing of day of kindergarten, you would draw butterflies. And when you would draw butterflies, the teachers would go around and notice something special about every butterfly. Look at you, you're yellow, it's so good. And look at those dots, and look at those big eyes. And then what would happen is the butterflies would go on the wall, and the lesson of the day was, you know what that lesson was? Each of you, you're as special and beautiful as a butterfly. Day number two is you would cut out snowflakes. And the lesson for the day, and all of them were different, and the lesson for the day was, each of you, you're as unique as a snowflake. So every kid felt as special as a butterfly and as unique as a snowflake. And then what happened is that parents were taught to praise everything they did. You should stay at the bottom of the sliding board, and you should just scream as the kid comes down, Tommy, Tommy, you're so good, you're so brave, you're so smart, look at you. You never gave attention to gravity, right? It was all about Tommy. It was all about what he was doing. So every kid felt special as a butterfly, unique as a snowflake, and in charge of everything in their environment. And how did it end up? The most anxious, depressed group of kids we've ever seen in our life. All right? Why? Do you ever have those days where you don't feel special as a butterfly? Do you have those days? Right? And what happened is we didn't tell kids that it wasn't okay. And then what happened is we made kids incredibly anxious because they thought that they could control everything in their environment and they were in charge. And you know what? You can't. Real confidence comes from competence. It comes from noticing what kids are doing right and not undermining them when things are not going well, and talking to them. We're going to talk about this later. Talking so that you understand they're the experts in their own lives and you help them figure things out rather than you impose your views. Competence. Next, connection. We've talked about this. Bottom line is that the kids who make it are the kids who are connected with adults or connected with other kids as well. Next is character, having an understanding of what is right and wrong. Included in this kind of character is the grit, having the tenacity. We've known that from the marshmallow studies in the 60s or 70s, that if you could delay gratification, you were more likely to be successful 30 years later. We've known that. The challenge is how do we get kids to learn these things? Next is contribution, tikkun olam, to be completely committed to repairing the world. So why does this matter? It matters because the ultimate act of resilience is to turn to another human being and to say, brother, I need a hand. The person who's going to make it is the person who can reach out and be supported by other people. What is it that's going to allow you to reach out and be supported without shame or stigma? It is the feeling that there's no shame in the room. No one wants to be someone else's project. No one wants there to be pity in the room. So what you want to do is prepare your kids to be able to receive when they need to. And what you're going to be able to, the best way to do that is to have a kid understand that it feels good to give. It feels really good to give. And in fact, when you give, you're usually doing it because of how good it feels to serve another human being. And when you know that, and you learn that because of volunteering or whatnot, when you learn that, it means that when you need to take, you can take without shame or stigma. Now you can care for me because I know you're doing this not because you pity me, not because you look down on me, but because it gives you pleasure, much as I've had pleasure. But it's more than that. Teenagers are held to low expectation, all of them. As they walk down the street, maybe not at this school, but as they walk down the street, teenagers are seen as feckless, as thoughtless. If you are a person of color, then your children are seen as dangerous. Okay? This is poison. This is toxic. The reason you want your kids to be out there serving the community, helping the neighbor, shovel snow, is you want that child to be surrounded by thank yous rather than condemnation. It is profoundly protective when that child is surrounded in that way. Next is coping. We're going to spend half an hour. I'm going to try to save half an hour for just talking about coping, because here's the bottom line. If Aaron, if you had asked me to come and to give a talk on eating disorders, if you had asked me to talk about cutting, about drug prevention, about delayed sex, I'd be giving you the same talk, guys. Because if you don't understand stress and the factors that cause stress in a community, then you don't understand why kids choose behaviors. And telling kids what not to do simply is meaningless. You show them what to do through your own behavior and self-care, and then you also show them what to do. And that's why those of you who are here with as parents of 3-year-olds, you're here at the right time. And then finally is control. Kids either believe that the world happens to them or they believe that they control their universe. So how are you disciplining? Because discipline means to teach, right? Doesn't mean to control. Absolutely doesn't mean to harm. Means to teach. How are you disciplining? Are you disciplining in the way that says, you'll do what I say? Why? What's the answer to that? How were we raised? Because I said so. That makes kids feel small. And they're angels, by the way. They're perfect angels until they stop being angels. Okay? Or does the kid understand that the freedoms I get, that the privileges I have are earned through my behavior? All right? Next. So that's what gives kids control, is that they know that their choices that they make are what get them privileges. But next, what's our goal with kids? Is our goal to have our kids be independent? I think the American goal is about rugged individualism. It's about really getting our kids to really be independent and to be able to stand on their own. And I think it's a social experiment that's doomed to fail. I think that every culture that has been strong has always thrived on interdependence. And my girls just left for college, and you know what? I want them to want to spend as much time with me as they can in their life. I would love them to have raised their families around the corner from me. I would really love that. I think that's a really, really healthy thing to do. Do I want them to live in my basement? No. So what is it that is going to create interdependence in our families? It's honoring independence during adolescence. When you install control buttons during adolescence by telling kids what they need to do, and if they don't, then they're disappointing you, or you do it, why, because I said so, then you install control buttons. And when your kid gets out of your house for college, that kid's not coming back. Coming home for, the holidays and coming home for Thanksgiving. That's it. They're not going to come home. What you want, if your kid understands that you honor their growing independence, that your goal is for them to stand on their own, then they won't have the control buttons. They'll say, you know what? They always gave me good advice. They always supported me. I'd like to hang out with them some more. All right? This is our real goal. So these are the 7 C's of resilience. The one that's most important is connection. Importance can't be overstated. So let's talk about that. Why does it feel like our connection is challenged during adolescence? Let's think about this first. So I want you to think of every developmental milestone like a kid is crossing a 12-foot chasm, right? It's a 12-foot chasm, and then at the bottom there are rusty metal spikes, and there are alligators on the bottom. And how do I get to the other side? So you might say, I'd like to build my child a bridge, right? But they're going to knock you down. So how do you get to the other side? You jump from where? Because looking down is too scary. And this is not new. So think when your kid was 11 months old and he or she took the first step, right? And as soon as she took her first step, what did she do? She fell down, and you went to pick her up. And she wanted to say, gosh, Mom, thank you so much because these legs are kind of wobbly, so I sure do appreciate the support. And then when she was 2 years old, she had those two-word sentences. And she was, but she was so smart, right? She had so much to say, and she just couldn't get it out of her mouth. I mean, not smart like other mothers thought their child was smart. Like yours was really special. And so what you did is you finished her sentences for her. And she wanted to say, gosh, Mom, thank you so much. I'm having articulation difficulties. But what did she do instead? She swatted you away and said, no, me. And now she's 15 years old, and she is about to go on her first date, and you decide to have the talk with her, right? Way too late, okay? But you decide to have the talk with her, and what she wants to say is, gosh, Dad, thank you so much, because there's, just last year I thought you were the sexiest man alive, and there's nobody I'd rather learn about healthy male sexuality from than you. But what does she say instead? Ew! And has anyone had a kid go to college yet? All right. That last summer, it is so special. It's when you have those mother-son dates, right, where you get to really talk about feelings and make sure you've taught him everything that you need. Like, does he know not to run with scissors? So you just want these dates, and then you ask him for these dates, and then what does he say? Like, he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to see Sheila till Thanksgiving. I have to spend every minute with her. And then right before he goes out off to college, what does he want to do? He wants to say to you, Mom, Dad, thank you so much. You've taught me everything. You've prepared me for the world. You've literally changed me, and you've tutored me, and you've supported me in so many ways. Do you think I'm ready for the academic pressures, the social pressures, the emotional pressures, even the sexual pressures? Can I call you several times a day? But what does he say instead? I'm out of this prison. So let's talk about what's happening. What's happening is that your kids are being raised in this wonderful, comfortable nest with one or two big fat birds bringing them big fat juicy worms, and life is good. And then something happens in the beginning of adolescence where a gland inside your head goes off and says, you know what, your body's beginning to change. And that's a signal that you're going to need to fly from the nest. And when that happens, suddenly you need for that nest to not look so comfortable, because who on earth would want to leave a nest that is that comfortable? So suddenly you have to begin to see that nest as kind of prickly, right? Think 13, 14-year-old girl. That nest is kind of prickly. And another thing, all of a sudden, those big birds that brought those fat, juicy worms, they're not going to be bringing them forever. So you have to kind of resent that they're doing this for you, and you'd really prefer them to be invisible. All right? And then suddenly, right before they're ready to go off to college, when they're really going to leap, which is, by the way, the hardest developmental task of your lifetime, is answering the question, who am I, and now I'm going to be on my own. It is the hardest developmental task of your lifetime. It is why adolescence is designed to be about risk-taking. If it's not about risk-taking, how can you possibly take the biggest risk of your life? Your job is to make sure that you allow your kids to take risk-taking in areas that are safe, like academics, and not take risk-taking in areas that are not safe, like doing drugs and driving drunk. Okay? But they're going to have to take risk-taking. And when you put so much pressure on them to fit inside of a box academically and say it's far too serious for your kid to take any risks, don't be surprised when they think they have permission to take risks in other categories. They've got to take risks because they've got to fly from that nest. They have to see that nest as absolutely uninhabitable before they leave. So the reason that your kid hates you during adolescence is because they love you so much it hurts. And if you really own that and really know that, you can handle anything. All right? The reason they're pushing against you is not because they've stopped loving you. It's because they love you so much it is painful. And when you know that, everything becomes better. And you will stop going up against your kid when he comes up against you. Instead, you'll understand what he's doing, back up, and love him even more. Listening. In terms of connection, there is nothing more important than listening. So what do you have to do to be able to listen to your kids? You need to turn off a couple of instinctual things that you do. The first thing is turn off the parent alarm. The parent alarm goes like this. Mom, I met this girl. You're too young to date. Mom, my friend Paul, he's using drugs, which is why I told you never to ever talk to Paul again. Here are conversations about sex and drugs that you will never have. Because if you've reacted, your kid's not talking to you. Another thing we do is we catastrophize. Mom, I got a D on a test, and I think it's because the teacher's completely unfair and didn't pay any attention to me. Well, you know what? He always had it against you. I'm going to go to the headmaster. We're going to get him fired if we need to. We will get you tutoring in 4 different subjects, but especially this one, we'll get twice a week, and we will move if we have to. And the other thing is over-empathy. Mom, I had this really big fight with Shoshana, and she was like my best friend ever, and I was sure that she was going to be like we were going to live next door to each other, and her kids were going to call me aunt, and my kids were going to call her aunt, and now I think I hate her. Well, I don't blame you. She's a little bitch, and I don't like her mother. So who is Shoshana the next day? Yeah, but you'll never know because you've reacted. Kids love drama with their friends and hate drama with their parents. And if you bring drama into the situation instead of being someone to bounce ideas off of, then don't be surprised when your kids will stop talking to you. And when we talk about monitoring, you're going to see that that's the most important thing in order for you to be able to monitor your kid. Now, we got about 20 minutes of pain. This is what's wrong with this community, is what we're talking about. Your style of what you want to do, you've got all the solution down. But I'm not worried about your kids becoming gang members. I am seriously worried that your kids will not like themselves because they feel they have to be good at everything. So let's talk about how not to make this happen and what happens. So the first thing is, what is perfectionism and why isn't it a good thing? So if this was a concert hall and there were 800 people in the room, and I played a great concerto, and I got a standing ovation. The high achiever, which is what you want your kids to be, would look around and say, what a blessing it is to be able to serve people like this, doing something you love. The perfectionist notices only one thing. She's sitting down. That's all the perfectionist notices. And furthermore, the perfectionist thinks she must be the person who knows the most, because I don't belong here anyway. They all have imposter syndrome. I'm playing soccer, and I get 3 goals. The high achiever is on his buddy's shoulders, and he's celebrating. The perfectionist is thinking that corner shot went wide. The last thing you want is for your kid to be a perfectionist. What you want is for them to be a high achiever. So, what are perfectionists like? They loathe themselves. They are terrified of getting a B+ because they think they have to be good at absolutely everything. They fear the D word. Because you're not beating your children anymore, and you shouldn't be, but because you're not, what we do instead is we get disappointed. Darling, I'm so disappointed in you. And these kids freak out to the word disappointed, all right? And when you fear the B+ and you fear disappointing people, you're not going to have any out-of-the-box thought. If you're not going to have any out-of-the-box thought, that is the death of creativity. Perfectionists have a fear of constructive feedback because they have imposter syndrome. They don't believe they're as good as they ever were. Let's talk about why failure, or as people told them were. Let's talk about why failure is such an important thing. If you look at industry, in this innovative industry now, they are not just measuring their successes, they are measuring their failures. So if you only measure your successes, they might be right here. And in the old days, you would say, great, we're not wasting any energy on things that don't work. But in the world as it exists now, you do not feel good about yourself as an industry until you begin experiencing failures. And when you begin experiencing failures, you know that you've stretched as far as you can go, that your target area is larger, and you know exactly where your research and development needs to go to overcome the failures. So measuring failures is key to being able to succeed. Failure is not a bad word, all right? What is a bad word is feeling like you have to be perfect, all right? So this is the time for your kids to learn how to fail and recover. And what I got today, to be honest with you talking, is that everybody knows this in this school, but then when you get to high school, people still have the culture of, but it counts now, which means you can't fail. And again, you listen to me, your kids' chances of getting into Stanford might go down. Your kids' chances of succeeding in the rest of their life shoots way up. So let's think about, let's use me as an example. I am a full professor at a Ivy League medical school, and my hospital is supposed to be the best hospital in the world. So I've got good credentials. I am 28 years out of medical school, and the first thing that you learn in medical school when you go onto the wards is how to read an EKG, all right? Because that's how you can tell the difference between something that is like real heart disease versus not real heart disease. I'm 28 years out of medical school, pretty well credentialed. I can't read an EKG. I can't. Why? Because if you haven't diagnosed me yet, this is what a little boy with ADD in 5th grade looks like when he grows up. You can't sit still, but you are really pretty good with people, and if something's creative, you're great at it, right? But an EKG has 12 different parts, and all these things are happening in those 12 parts, and you have to compare and contrast them. I can't do it. Has anyone ever been hurt because I can't read an EKG? And I take care of some of the sickest kids in the world. Has anyone ever been hurt? No. Because I know how to get help. I know what my strengths are. I know what my limitations are. I know how to use humor. I know how to, in medicine, we call this consultation. I can do it. I'm so good at what I do that no one questions my incompetencies. No one questions them. Do you think your kids nowadays, who are feeling like they have to be perfect at absolutely everything, would be able to say to people, you know what, I can't read an EKG? Instead, they're going to be pretending that they can because it's too terrifying to have someone know something they can't do, and that's when children get hurt. We've got to let kids learn their limitations early. Here's some lies you don't want to buy into. Kids, I want you to know they're going to be taking a test. It's called the ACTs or the SATs in 11th grade. I want you to know that this test will determine your life. If you do well, life will be handed to you on a silver platter. If you don't do well, mediocrity at the very best. Because this test will determine your life, it's particularly important that you relax when you take it. Kids, in order to get into a good college now, you have to be good at absolutely everything. That's why I want you to take multiple AP classes in many varied topics to show how much you are willing to stretch. But I need you to get A's in those topics as well, darling. And I also want them to see how creative you are. And that's why I've been signing you up for multiple lessons since you've been an early child. And I know that you really, really loved the drums, but darling, that's so ordinary. That's why we signed you up for the bassoon. And darling, I know that I want them to also see how what a good collaborator you are. And that's why I've had you on team sports from the time that you've been little. But it's important for people to also know that you are a leader. So you've got to get one of the captain spots by senior year. Trust me. And darling, I know what a good person you are, but it doesn't show up on your resume. That's why I'm sending you to Botswana for 11 days. You're going to build a water purification system. First of all, am I lying? So what is the message that we're sending to kids? We're sending the message to the kids that if you're not good at everything, you're not good enough. And this is dangerous. So other things. Don't say to your kids, just try your best, because what they hear is, just try your best. And if you do, I know you'll get that A. All right? Other things that cause perfectionism. We have a society that is really kind of poisonous in terms of what we consider success. We equate success with money, great actors, lots of money, or great sports figures. And what do we, and who should our heroes be, by the way? Who should successful people be? People contribute to the world, teachers, people stay home to take care of their mother with Alzheimer's disease, firemen. These should be heroes. Think about when Michael Phelps got a bronze medal. Do you remember that? Michael Phelps gets a bronze medal. And do you remember the commentators? Michael, you must be very disappointed in your failures. How does it feel? Do you think the people in your hometown are disappointed with your poor performance? In other countries, a bronze medalist, they rename cities. Okay? And then what did we do when Michael Phelps smoked marijuana? We destroyed him. We build heroes up. When they're not perfect, we're deeply disappointed. And then when they mess up, we destroy them. Our kids are watching. Next, so what we need to praise, we have to notice the heroes around us, and we have to also praise just the acts of loving kindness around us. When we do that, our kids are going to be the kind of people we want to be. The next thing you have to think about is there's another whole factor that creates perfectionism, which is what makes people feel like they need to be perfect little girls and boys. And one of the things that makes people feel like they have to be perfect little girls and boys is when they're worried about you. And they could be worried about you because you've been through a difficult divorce. They could be worried about you because you've survived cancer. They could be worried about you because you're an immigrant and they know that you have sacrificed an enormous amount to be able to make it, to make sure that they're successful. They could be worried because there's historical trauma in your family and they just want to protect you. And when that happens, they become perfect little girls and boys. So for example, if I went through a very difficult divorce, the conversation that I want to be having is something like, darling, your mother and I had pretty difficult divorce, and you know that. And you know what I notice about you? I notice that you are taking care of me. And I really appreciate that because you are a very caring person. But you know what? Lots of things in my life aren't going perfectly. But the one thing that I know that I can do, the one thing that I care about the most is parent you. And what you need to know is that when you are taking care of me, you're taking away my ability to parent you, right? Is this being recorded? It is, okay. Then I'm going to skip the next thing. Yeah, I'm going to skip it. But in terms of historical trauma, if you've been through or your family has been through something terrible. So I come from a Holocaust family, or I'm married into a Holocaust family. And what happens is these parents have been through so much. My mother-in-law was in the first train into Auschwitz, and she was there for 3.5 years. She's one of 2 surviving women left. And she went through hell, but she was the most loving person in the world. But her children needed to take care of her, right? That's not what you want. What's the conversation you want to have? You want the conversation to be something like, darling, do you think I went through all of this? I went through all this to celebrate lives, to have children, to survive. And when you are taking care of me, instead of letting me take care of you, you're not letting me be the parent that you need me to be. That's the conversations we need to be having with our children. So that's everything that can go wrong. The good news is I'm not leaving you with a downer. We absolutely know what can go right. Are there any quick questions on what can go wrong? I don't want to enter in a 20-minute debate now. We can do that later. But did that make sense so far? All right. Let's now talk about how to build that high achiever. The first thing is letting young people make mistakes. Make them stretch. Make them a little bit uncomfortable under your watchful eye. Make them a little bit uncomfortable while they are spending 8 hours a day with child development specialists. That's who teachers are. Teachers can make them stretch, test their comfort levels, and still protect them. The rest of the world doesn't do that. When you don't let the schools fill this role, then you're actually setting your kid up for failure later. Next, I know that this school is very into Carol Dweck's work, and so am I. I think that Carol Dweck's work explains what happened with the self-esteem generation more than anything else. May I spend 5 minutes summarizing it, or are you guys all experts? 5 minutes. All right. Here's what she does. She's a Stanford educator. Here's what she does, and she wrote the book Mindset, by the way, which is summarized in my books, but if you want to go to the source, you should read that. Here's what she does. She takes 5th graders. She divides them into 2 groups. This group, she gives them all a puzzle test, like an IQ test, and the end of it, like the puzzles and the mazes. This group, she says to them individually, you did really well because you're so smart. This group, you did really well because you worked so hard. That's the entire intervention, guys. You're so smart, you worked hard. And then she gives them she says, who would like to take some more puzzle tests? You know, I have some more. And who wants to do the puzzles? The kids who were told they were smart or the kids who worked hard? Absolutely, because the kids who were smart, they're like, no, I have my label, thank you, I like it. Not going to change it. Okay? The kids who were told that they worked hard are like, yes, let me show you what I do. Let me show you how I sweat. Then what she does is she gives them an 8th grade test. So it's harder than they can actually handle. What happens to the kids who were told they were smart? They fall apart with anxiety, particularly the girls, because they're about to lose their label. What happens to the kids who are told they worked hard? They just keep working. The next day, she gives them a 5th grade test again. And the scores should be the same, because don't forget, tests are all without standard or bias. And so what happens is she gives them the 5th grade test, and what happens to the scores of the kids who were told they were smart? Go down 20%. These kids, scores go up 20%. Entire intervention, you're so smart, you worked hard. One line created that kind of an outcome. Now imagine putting it into your life. Later, she does another body of research where she looks at people who are adults, young adults, 20s and 30s, and she asks them how they were parented. And this group of kids were parented by lots of praise about who they are. Not who they are the way I was describing. I was describing who they are. This is who they are. You are so smart. You are so handsome. You are so beautiful. You are such a good athlete. You are so good at math. You are so good at history. You are such a great artist. You are such a great pianist. All right? This is what you are. These same parents who praise them, and by the way, that's self-esteem. That's the self-esteem generation. That's what we were told to do. All right? These same parents tend to look at the kids in terms of results. How did you do on your math test? Did you get first seed in the recital? How many goals did you get in soccer? Did you get the trophy? It's all about what you produce. You are this, and you produce this for me. This group of kids had parents who were more likely to focus on what they did. You studied really hard, and because of that, you did well on the test. It paid off. You know, I love watching you play soccer. I love watching you sweat. You, like, mark your man, and what's different about you than other people is you're looking at everybody, including your own team, which is why that goal was made. Not by you, but you passed it, and that was awesome. All right? I love watching you create. I love watching. It's not so much that I love the pictures, and I do, but I love watching you. I love watching you as you create. And what are the kind of things that we ask? We say things like, what did you learn in school today? We say things like, how'd you pick up your game today? And we say things like, tell me about your picture. Rather than, that's the most beautiful picture, you're my little Michelangelo. All right? We say things like, tell me about your picture. What do these people look like? In their 20s and 30s, these people look for life partners who flatter them. Okay? They have higher levels of anxiety and depression. They hate hard work because they see hard work as a sign that you're not naturally intelligent. They don't like thinking outside the box because they've been told they're very good within the box. They hate constructive criticism because they see constructive criticism as an attack, because they've never believed what they were told they are, and they see constructive criticism as an attack. Did you just see the death of success? So I call this perfectionism. She calls it a fixed mindset, but it's the same thing. These group of people look for life partners who complement them. Love hard work because they see hard work as a sign that you will build your intelligence. They love thinking outside the box because they find it interesting. They have lower levels of depression or anxiety, and they really appreciate constructive feedback. Did you see how we just created successful kids? So if I had to create a table for you of what to say and what not to say, which is, by the way, in my books, but let me try to replicate it. Here's the bottom line. Bottom line is, this is, you are blank. Emphasis on the word are. How did you do? This is, you did blank, and did you notice that you earned this as a result? So here, you're giving the control to the kid. There, you're taking away the control, because they're either that or not. Here, it's, what did you do? So this is, you are so smart. Did you get an A? And this is, you worked really hard and it paid off, didn't it? Let's look at criticism. You are a slob. You are a pig. You are lazy. You are uncaring. This is, your room is really messy, and I almost broke my neck because you didn't clean up. Do you see the difference? One is a label, and one is what you do. And it makes all the difference in the world. All right? And this, from an evidence point of view, is probably the highest level of evidence in terms of how to raise successful kids. Now, this last thing is kind of Ginsburgism. People have to be uneven. Let's tie it together. You want your kids to be really successful. You want them to be fantastic at something, to find their passion, to figure out what it is to be spiky. People who are really successful are spiky, meaning they're really good at something, and then what makes them interesting is they do other things as well. And telling kids that they have to be good at everything is exactly what's creating their anxiety, because it is not consistent with human nature. All right? So here's the speech. It's not a cute little line, but here's the speech. Darling, I expect you to work hard in everything you do. If you do not work hard in everything you do, then you will never trust the results. But I want you to pay attention to the results when you put in your greatest effort. There are going to be some things that are going to come really naturally for you, and in fact, you're not going to have to work very hard. It's just going to come easy, and that's great. Congratulations, but if you're not that interested in this, but it just comes easily because it's natural, but it doesn't challenge you, that's not your job. Take the grade, but it's not your job. There are going to be other things you're going to have to work really hard at, but that you think are really interesting. And the more that you do, the better you become, and you just want to become better and better, right? And when you get something wrong, you just kind of keep trying to figure out how you can change things. That's your career. You found it. There are other things that you're not very good at, but you really want to get better, and you find it really, really interesting, and you do get a little bit better, but you're not great. It's not very natural, but it's fun. That's your hobby. There are going to be other things that you're going to work very hard at, and you're not very good at it at all. And you get the tutoring. You've gone to your teachers. You've gone to your friends. You've come to me. You don't find it interesting. It really is something you dislike, and you're not that good at it. Forget about it. This is what creates anxiety in your kids. The feeling like the stuff that they are not naturally good at, they have to be good at anyway. That's what's making your kids fall apart. And this is why, if you listen to me, your kid might not get into Stanford. There are many of schools that they will get into, but you will accept the fact that in order, rather than tell the kid, you've got to do whatever it takes. It doesn't matter if you don't sleep. It doesn't matter if you have no friends. It doesn't matter. You've got to pull off that A or a B+ at the very worst in something that they're not naturally inclined to do. The system does not reward that. Your child's mental and emotional health and long-term success will, until we change the system. All right? So, not all perfectionists are perfect. All right? This is probably a very, very hard school to be average at, because your average kids are probably at the 75th or 80th percentile to begin with, which makes it really, really hard. So, you are looking seriously at the most uneven human being in the world. I am fantastic at what I do and good at absolutely nothing else. Really, really. I can't turn a screwdriver. I mean, I like the little straight thing gets all jaggedy when I'm done with it. It's awful. My real sense of direction for real is that this is north, as is this. It's like whatever direction I'm thinking in, right? I also am a kid who, tested, gifted, whatever, did really well in elementary school, top of the class. 7th grade began falling apart because my ADD, it was 1974, we didn't have ADD, and so I just couldn't compensate. So my grades began being A's in anything you could talk or write, and C's, D's, and F's in anything you had to do homework for at home. And so all of the teachers were always saying things like, oh, and the other thing you need to know is that I grew up in a house where, I knew that my father was going to absolutely love me no matter what kind of a doctor I became. I knew that. And so everybody was always saying to me, Ken, you're not living up to your potential. So what did I do? Did I talk about how, the mismatch between my intelligence and my ability to focus was, really making me anxious and I was feeling insecure? Do you think I did that? I did drugs. Just enough to create a lie. Not because I was into drugs. I mean, they were fun, but not because I was into them, but because I really liked the reputation it created as a kid who didn't care. And it was a lie. And so for your kids who go to this school, who are engaging in risk behaviors, one of two things is going on. They're either working so hard that they feel like they've deserved to be able to party, or the kids who are using it more chronically are kids who are trying to pretend that they don't care. And the gift that you could give your kids, there is a 0 chance a kid at this school doesn't care about their success. 0. And I'm sure you have quite a few who are pretending that they don't. but they're lying to you. So rather than get down on them and push them, create opportunities for them to tell you the truth. It's not that I don't care, it's that I care so much. What's your long-term goal? It's to build a healthy adult. I want the culture of this school to begin where the normal conversation is, what are we doing to build this healthy 35-year-old? I want that to be the culture of your school. All of a sudden, everyone will become more successful. Your short-term goal is to have your child love learning, right? If your kid's in kindergarten, have them love learning. That's what's going to be the most predictive thing for them success. Your medium-term goal is having your child find the right match that's going to foster their love of learning. That's the college they're looking for, okay? I'm a Penn professor. My kids might have maybe gone into Penn because of who I am, but they didn't apply because it wouldn't have been a right match for them. It would have been great for me financially, but they would have been miserable there. There are some kids who are very happy there. It's a great school. But for my kids, it would have been a horrible match, and they would not have loved learning. All right, going on to some other stuff, changing topics, okay? And at the end, we can go back to this stuff with questions. We'll have like 15 minutes for questions. Probably at 9 o'clock, we'll have questions. Let's talk about competence. So I'm going to skip this concept. Let's talk to kids in a way that they can figure out their own solutions. So now let's do some cognitive development stuff. I am 5 years old. How do I think as a 5-year-old, you know? I am an egocentric thinker. It's all about me, all right? Do I think about future consequences of current behaviors? I can't. So to my 5-year-old, do I say to them, listen, here's $1.25. Get yourself a Snickers bar, but I strongly suggest investment, because if you do, it'll really pay off, all right? So what's that kid going to ask for? He's going to ask for the Snickers bar. And how does a 5-year-old view people? People are good or bad. And how do you determine if they're good or bad? Is that cookie for me? Thank you. Do you see how dangerous it is to be a child? You don't think about future consequences of current behaviors. You don't think about the complexity of human nature. So what do? We watch our kids. Now I'm walking through adolescence, where you should be watching me closer than ever, but you're not. And now I'm an adult. Same height. But how do I think now? This was concrete thought. This is seeing things exactly as it is without thinking about the future. This is abstract thought. So now, as an abstract thinker, I know about the possibilities. I know about all the different things that I could consider, but which is really protective for me, right? To be able to, it's why I don't smoke. It might give me pleasure for a minute, but it's not worth the disease. It's not worth the lung breakdown. It's not worth where I'm going to be in 20 or 30 years. It's healthy for me. How do I view people? Are people good or bad the way they were in childhood? Now, as an adult, do I view people that way? No. Suppose someone notices how exquisitely handsome I am, okay? They ask me out to dinner, and they tell me to get the most expensive stuff on the menu, and then they're incredibly flattering all during the dinner, and then we go for a walk. And they buy me a new sweater, they buy me new sneakers, and then they ask to touch little Ken. What do I say? What do I say? Do you need help with this? Seriously? Why do I say no, despite their flattery and their kindness? Why do I say no? Because I understand, number one, that what gives me pleasure for a moment is not healthy for my marriage, is not healthy for my family. And what do I know about their kindness and their flattery? Yeah, that they have an underlying motivation. They want something. They are manipulating me. Do you understand how protective it is for me to understand that the choices I make now affect the future and people can be full of crap? We know this. Here's what you need to know. Only 85% of adults reach abstract thought, and it's related to intelligence, so all of your kids will get to abstract thought. All kids in times of crisis go concrete. The next thing you need to know is that the ability to think abstractly is a developmental process. You can't think abstractly as a 5-year-old, all right? You begin to be able to think abstractly as puberty hits, and you only get really good at it at mid-puberty to late puberty, all right? But all people in times of crisis go concrete. So now, how is it that I develop to be able to think abstractly? There are two things that are occurring. The first thing that occurs is my brain changes during adolescence. What else happens during adolescence that makes me understand the complexities of human nature and that what I do now will affect the future? What else happens? Yeah. I'm a 14-year-old girl, and a guy comes up to me and says, I love you. Do I say, I question the veracity of that statement? Right? And I say, I love you too. And then the guy says, you know, words aren't good enough between us. I want to show you how much I love you. And then they make love. And where is he the next day? He's gone. And she learns by going from here to here towards the safety of adulthood. She will have been hurt, but that hurt will teach her real life. And she will not suffer from that particular line again. So, if we were learning theorists and not educators and parents, we would say, this is great. Get out of the way always. Let your kids fail always, because it's a great way to learn. But we are parents, and therefore, we want our kids to be able to be safe. We understand the complexity of human nature. We understand how it's going to affect the future. So what do? We tell them. And how do we tell them? We lecture them. And here's what a lecture sounds like. Don't you know that what you're doing right now, which I'm going to call behavior A, could easily lead to consequence B? If consequence B happens, you could go on to consequence C. I never imagined my little girl doing consequence C. Now I wonder what's between your ears. And if consequence C happens, you could go on to consequence D, which I never even imagined you doing, and you never would have until you began hanging out with Lisa, whose own mother doesn't love her, and you're letting her influence you. If consequence E happens, you're going to go directly on to consequence F, which could lead to consequence G. Look at me, young lady, when I'm talking to you. This is not for my own good. If consequence G happens, you're going to go on to consequence H, which could lead to consequence I. And do you know what happens if consequence I happens? You die. And what does the kid hear? Womp, 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 die. They understand your condescension. They understand that you do not believe that they are capable of mature thought, but they haven't learned a thing. Listen again. A goes to B, which goes to C. There are several moderating, intervening variables that will make a difference to the ultimate outcome. That's algebra. You can't teach algebra to someone running from the tiger. You can't teach algebra to someone who is a child who is not yet cognitively equipped to be able to absorb abstract ideas. So when we lecture our kids, they get all of our condescension. But we put them into crisis, and once we put them into crisis, they can't think abstractly, they don't get a word that we are saying, and it only puts our relationships in jeopardy. Make sense? So what do you want to do? You want to lecture, but without delivering a lecture. You want to change your mathematical cadence so that it is simple math. Because you can be running from a tiger and still get, what's 1 + 2? You can still get it. But you can't ask someone running from the tiger what the Pythagorean theorem is. You can't. They won't do it. So you change your mathematical cadence so it looks like this. You were thinking about doing behavior A? I hear you, but I worry sometimes that that might lead to behavior B. Have you given any thought to that? Tell me about that. And you listen, and you listen, and you facilitate as your child answers the questions based on the knowledge and the brilliance that he has. And when he's at B, and only when he's at B, do you take him to C. And when he's at C, and only when he's at C, do you take him to D. Does that make sense? I could give you an example, but my best example that doesn't involve like high-risk kids comes from the Bill Cosby show, which I know has become controversial. But it is still the best parenting show that's been on TV. So may I use this example? So Bill is a doctor. The wife is a lawyer. Theo, they want to go to Morehouse College, which is the top African-American college that there is, and they call it Hillman on the show. Theo comes home one day and he gets a D on a test. Do you remember this episode? Theo gets a D. Bill explodes. What do you mean you got a D? How are you going to get into Hillman with a D? And Theo says, don't worry about me, Dad. I'm not going to college anyway. Can you imagine the lecture? You're not going to college. Well, what kind of job are you going to get there? Well, that job's going to move overseas, and then this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and then you're going to lose your job, and then you're going to end up having, you're going to lose your apartment, you're going to have $40 in your pocket, and then I see you walking down the street, and I see you grabbing a bottle, going to the liquor store, buying a bottle of liquor. I see you down on the ground, frothing at the mouth until a bunch of other teenagers can come by, kicking your cirrhotic liver, and then you're going to die. Is Theo going to learn a thing? Not a thing. Here's what Bill does. He says, what is the lecture? What is the lesson I want to accomplish? I want to guide my child through it so that I can honor the intelligence that he has rather than impose on him my views and make him believe that I don't think he's capable of thought. So you're not going to college? Nah. Well, what were you thinking of doing? I don't know. I was going to be a regular person. Yeah? Well, what do regular people do? You know, get a job. Well, what kind of a job were you thinking about? Well, I haven't thought about it very much. Well, do you know anyone your age who's gotten a job? Yeah. Tell me about them. Well, I have this friend. He works at a gas station. Well, how much does he make? Well, I think he makes a lot. I think he makes like $8 an hour. Wow. And they figured it out, and it was $1,200. And Bill has Monopoly money on stage. Do you remember this now? Bill has Monopoly money on stage, and he hands Theo $1,200. He says, oh, no, he says, I'll give you $1,500. He hands him $1,500, and Theo goes, thanks, Dad, and he begins counting the money. And then Bill says, oh, by the way, the tax man comes for regular people first, and he takes a chunk of money. And then he says, Theo, where are you going to live? Because you're not living here. And he takes pretty much all the money. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Then Theo says, I was thinking about living on the Upper West Side. Nice. And then he takes all the money, and Theo says, I'll live in Jersey. And he takes the money back. And then Bill takes car money and gas money and toll money. And then he says, Theo, it seems pretty important that you look good. Theo goes, Dad, I don't care what I look like. The ladies care what I look like. And Bill takes $100. And Theo said, if it's all right with you, Dad, I want to look really good, and hands him another $100. And he says, Dad, thank you so much. You know, I'm not wasting my time in school. I'm looking good. I have my own car. I never even thought about having my own car, my own place. This is great. You are right. And then he said, Theo, you have a problem. Well, what's that, Dad? You haven't eaten yet, Theo. And he takes all the money. And Theo says, I'll eat bologna and peanut butter. He takes some money back. He's got $40. He waves in his father's face. What does his father say? Do you remember? Theo, you going to have a girlfriend? And Theo goes like, oh, yeah. And Bill goes, doop. And on the show, Theo says, I guess I better hit the books, huh, Dad? Kids are smart when you give them the opportunity to display their intelligence. When you force them in an abstract way and shame them through a lecture, you're not going to get them where they need to be. All right? I'm going to skip that. Let's talk now about control. How much control should we give kids? First of all, do you want to take a 1-minute stand and stretch break? All right, so do a 1-minute in-place stand and stretch, because we've got 40 minutes left. Okie doke, starting again. All right, if you could have your seats again. Okay, so the next question is how much control we should have over people's lives. And we actually know we have an enormous amount of data on how much control we should have over our kids' lives. All right, when we're talking about control, we are talking about parenting style. When we are talking about parenting style, we are talking about two forces. One force is love and warmth, and the other force is monitoring and protection. All right? When you put those two forces in play, you end up coming up with 4 parenting styles. All right? The first parenting style is very controlling and not very warm. This is called authoritarian parenting. And this is the parenting of the 1950s. This is, you'll do what I say. Why? Because I told you so. And how do kids turn out? They are angels. They are angels. These are the yes ma'am, no ma'am kids. They are very, very polite. They are angels until they stop being angels. And then when they stop being angels, they do not tell parents what's going on in their lives, and they go off the deep end. All right? So, for example, if you parent in this way, your kid will have sex an average of 3 months later than other kids. But when they do, you will not know. They will not contracept. They're more likely to get pregnant. Okay? And you'll never know. So that felt so bad being parented that way that we created the equal and opposite reaction. And the equal and opposite reaction was this. I love you, darling, so much. You know, I know that you and I are going to have such a good relationship. We're going to be like friends. All right? And I know that you're going to tell me what's going on in your life because that's how comfortable you're going to be with me. And then the message basically was, I love you so much. I'm going to give you good values. I'm going to trust you. Now go out and do what you want. I trust you. And how do these kids end up? They're very nice. They love us. They have an incredible fear of disappointing us. Do we know what's going on in their lives? Absolutely not. We do this precisely because we think we'll know what's going on in their life, but study after study show that parents who are permissive do not know what's going on in their life because they don't want to disappoint us, okay? And they engage in a lot of risk behaviors. The worst kind of parenting, and there's none of you here, is disengaged parenting. It's neither warm nor controlling, and it basically is kids will be kids. I figured it out, they'll figure it out. All right? And the only time these parents get involved is when the kids burn down the barn, and what do the kids do? They learn to burn down the barn. The correct kind of parenting, the parenting that has been shown across cultures to work, is balanced parenting that is both loving and warm and protective. All right? This kind of parenting is also known as authoritative parenting. My book that came out last week is trying to brand another kind of name for this. Why? Because right now you have insanity out there in the parenting literature, right? You've got the tiger mom, you've got the reaction to the tiger mom, which is free-range parenting, and what you need to do is bring some sanity in. So the message that the American Academy of Pediatrics is putting out there through my book is called Lighthouse Parenting. The concept being, you want to be like a lighthouse for your child, a beacon of stability for them to measure themselves against. You want to look down at the rocks and make sure that they don't crash against the rocks, but you want to believe in and trust in their capacity to ride the waves on their own and prepare them to do so. Do you like it? All right. It is middle ground parenting, and unlike all of these other kinds of parenting, it is authoritative or balanced parenting. It is. I've just given a name to it because America likes to market things. Okay? But it is based on 30 years of research that says these kids, the parents know the most of what's going on in their lives, hands down. These kids, lowest drug use, lowest sexual initiation, less likely to be bullied, less likely to bully, less anxiety, less depression, higher academic scores. My own research, half as likely to be in a car crash. In every parameter, these parents do best. So Lighthouse Parenting is it just sounds better than balanced parenting or authoritative parenting, but it is science-based as opposed to, I don't know, I raised my kids and wanted to write a book. All right, which is a very, very dangerous thing, some of those books out there right now, I just have to tell you. Okay? So now, you're going to say, well, Ken, I don't really need you to tell me how to love my kid. I love my kid. But could you give me some advice on how to monitor the kid? So we knew, 10 years ago, we knew exactly how to monitor kids. It was, parents, you're the anti-drug. You want to know where the kid's going, who they're going to be with, when they're going to be home, who, what, when, or why, right? And this was, and you haven't seen this in about 5 years in public health advertisements. Do you know why you don't see this anymore? Can you take a guess? Can you guess why it doesn't work? Because they lie. When you ask kids, what are you doing, where are you going, and it's just all about that, kids lie. Effective monitoring is about knowing what is going on in your kid's life, and knowing what is going on in your kid's life is completely about being the kind of parent that they choose to talk to. We've been talking about this all morning. I've just put it in different flavors. The parents who know the most are the authoritative lighthouse parenting. Why? When you only get engaged when there's a question of safety or morality, then the kids, they want to do the right thing, and they're going to want to check in with you. When you get engaged in everything, get out of my face. All right? So they want to know. Second, the parents who listen and don't react know the most. Let's keep going. Judith Smetana's work. She looked at a bunch of different parents, and she looked at, kids. She works with hundreds of kids, and she says, tell me about what you think is legitimate authority for adults to enter your life. And kids divide things into 3 categories. Things are about safety, and all kids across all cultures say parents should be involved if it's about safety. Or it's about rules of society. If it's rules of society, most kids in most cultures think it's parents' job. Or it is about personal business. And almost all kids in almost all cultures think it's none of your business. So personal business is the color of your kid's hair, the shirt that they choose to wear, who their friends are. And if you try to enter their lives in this way, they will push you away. All right? So the key to parenting is to know that and not enter their lives in that way. But when something's on the cusp, move it into safety or move it into rules of society. So, for example, your daughter comes home and she wants to get an ear gauge to stretch her earlobe out to here, right? And you just go like, and you say, ew, I hate the way that looks. Then you have put it squarely in personal territory. And her response to you is, it's not your face, is it, mommy? Because you've put it in personal territory. Let's instead put it into rules of society. Darling, I love you, and I love having a daughter who expresses herself. I really do. I love having a kid who's out of the box. My only concern with this is that people are going to judge you. It's going to be harder to get into a job. It's going to be harder to get an interview, not just now, because now you're a kid. But it's also going to be harder in 30 years, because you're going to be a 50-year-old who has an earlobe down to here, and people will judge you. How can you express yourself now in a way that will still make you feel like yourself, but it won't be as permanent? Safety. Darling, you cannot drive with any peer passengers in your car. Why do you hate my friends? You've placed it perfectly in a personal territory. Darling, I love you so much, and I like your friends a lot, and I want you to be together, and I'll drive you guys wherever you need to go. But it takes only 3 seconds to avoid a crash. You got to see what's happening, you have to think about what's happening, and you have to do it. I, have reflexes, so I don't have to do a lot of thinking. You do. That's true of early drivers. And when you're with friends in your car, 999 times out of 1,000, it's not going to matter. Because if you laugh at them, and that's 3 seconds, it doesn't matter because there's nothing in the road. But 1 in 1,000 times, there's going to be a truck coming out of a corner. There's going to be a lady who's driving too slowly. There's going to be a kid who's coming out of an alley on a bike. And you need to be aware. And until you have your reflexes down, you can't do it. And let me tell you, 999 out of 1,000 might be good odds. But I guarantee you, you drive a lot, you're going to see one of those things every couple days. I love you way too much to put you at risk. You put it in safety. Got it? Next, fighting. Fighting is good. Now let's bring Nancy Darling's work into it. So boys and girls are different. So here is boy rebellion. What? So boys become deaf and tired. Okay? As a pediatrician, any other pediatricians in the room? Deneen was here, but she left. So as a pediatrician, I will tell you that one of the most common chief complaints of the 14-year-old visit, mothers come in, could you check his hearing? Okay? That's boy rebellion. Girls, they fight like you're taking a bone from a dog, they fight. And fighting is good, because as long as they're fighting, you know what's going on in their life. What is the secret to keeping them fighting? You let them win. So my daughter's 16 years old. She comes home and she says, Abby, I met the cutest guy ever, and I've been waiting for him to ask me out or even imagining, and he did. But he asked me out to this concert, and it breaks all your rules because it's Saturday night. I'm not going to get home till like 3 in the morning, which is way after curfew. But listen, why do you have those rules? Let's think about it. You want me to do well in school, and I get that. And to do my homework, I need you to know I'm going to get all my homework done when I get home on Friday night. I absolutely promise you I'll get it all done. And listen, I'm even going to let you meet him. I'm going to bring him into the house, and here's what I want. I just want you to go and hello? And then walk away, okay? And then what will happen is, as soon as the concert ends, I'm going to text you, and you're going to know I'm going to be home in like 18 minutes from there. So it's not, and don't worry about me getting sleep. Don't worry, I'm going to be able to sleep late on Sunday because all my work's going to be done. So I'm going to catch up. It's going to be all good for the week. My only answer is yes. Why? She's thought it through. She's come up with ways that she's going to be responsible and safe. And if I say no, here is Thursday night. Hey, listen, I love you, Abby. Listen, I got to run. But don't forget Saturday night I'm sleeping over Rachel's, right? They lie. We don't want to set them up to lie. All right, we're going to skip this. This is a concept of how to give control one step at a time. This is also in the books because I want to be able to spend enough time on stress and coping. If I could walk away with like 2 things, I want your kids to be happy and successful, and that's the perfectionism prevention. And I want your kids not to engage in negative behaviors, and that's what this is about. And again, if your kid is 3 years old, you're here at the right time. If your kid is 17, it's not too late. All right? So resilience at its core is about learning to cope in a positive way with life's inevitable stressors. And we're going to do our greatest good by raising youth with a wide repertoire of positive coping strategies. By the way, all of your kids will get this lesson. All right? They're going to get a very truncated perfectionistic message, obviously geared towards them. Okay? And what I will try to do is I will try to leverage the righteous indignation of youth. Seriously. I will try to get them frustrated at the messages that they've received. What I hope is that that righteous indignation will come home to you tomorrow. Seriously, I hope it will. And they will say, what do you think about this thing? And you get into that is your opportunity to really shape your kid's life, okay? This, they're not going to come and talk to you about, but you can trust that they got it. Resilience. Stress is incredibly uncomfortable. It makes you smell. It makes you not be able to think clearly. It's so uncomfortable that you got to cope with it. Coping is anything that makes you feel better. Anything. And everything you fear is in that negative box. That's gangs, that's sex, that's drugs, that's cutting, that's eating disorders. It's all there. That's running away. All right? What you want is to raise your kid with such a wide repertoire of positive coping strategies that the path of least resistance is right there. The negative coping strategies, they work. They work well. The only reason they're negative is because they mess up your life, right? But they work. And if you don't face that reality, you're not going to be able to get your kids to come up with other things. So what we want to do is we want for kids to first be able to define the stressor, right? And so before we get into a plan, 3 questions you want to teach your kids and you want to model, because this, by the way, really healthy for you as well. I'm a pediatrician, so I'm not allowed to give you advice, but trust me. All right? 3 questions. Hey, this thing that's bothering me right now, is this a real tiger or a paper tiger? Again, with the bottom line being if it can't chew my face off, not a real tiger. All right? Second, how many of you had grandmothers who said something like, always say to yourself, this too shall pass? Right? That is about being able to look at a situation and say, how am I going to feel in a month? How am I going to feel in a year or in a week? Because if the answer is I'm going to feel better in a week, then guess what? This is not a problem. Next, even when good things happen, sometimes we get completely crazy. This is where all the superstition comes from, right? Stop. Maybe you earned it. Maybe you got lucky. But just because something good happens doesn't mean you're going to lose it. So we begin with those 3 questions. Then what we have to do, so this is the American Academy of Pediatrics Coping Plan. I made this in 2006, looking at the literature. And what the literature says is that we have to have human beings know how to engage problems, but you also have to have them know how to disengage from problems. If they don't know how to disengage from problems, they will find drugs. Drugs are the disengagement strategies used by human beings for 6,000 years. You want your kids not to do drugs, you got to have other ways that they're going to disengage. Then you got to be able to deal with emotions. Dealing with emotions, there's nothing more effective in coping than connecting with other human beings. That is why women cope better than men. But if you only connect with, and this has nothing to do with having a penis, and everything to do with how we socialize our boys. Okay? So you have to be able to talk about your feelings, but you only talk about your feelings and you don't solve your problems, it's right there to bite you in the butt an hour later or a month later. Right? So you need all of these kind of things. So here's a stress management plan for young people that probably works for you, and it's a great way to build a college resume. What you will see is that if you think about this, your kid's going to have everything they need to be in college. They have to pick and choose from lots of choices in each category. It does not mean they have to do 7 things in each category. You want them to be well-balanced to be able to manage life. So the first thing are problem-focused strategies, the first 3. The first is making the problem manageable. A lot of what I do, I work with street youth, and so a lot of what I do is brief interventions. This is the most important thing I do, is move kids from visualizing a problem as a mountain, because when you visualize it as a mountain, you look at the top, you fall at the base, you say, I can never get there, you look at the bottom and you say, I can never get around it. But when I teach kids that mountains are just made up of hills and that all you have to do is step up one hill at a time, and at each hill, suddenly the mountaintop doesn't seem so far away, life becomes manageable. This is about making lists. This is about making timelines. This is about taking big problems, breaking them up into small pieces. The next is active avoidance. The man who wins every fight is the man who never has to show up. And if your kid believes they have to be good at everything, tackle everything, deal with everything, they're not ready for life, right? If there's a bully in school, you've got to take that on. If there's a bully in your neighborhood and he only gets involved if you go by his house, what would you tell your kid? Don't go by his house. Next, letting some things go. So in the world of resilience theorists, there is controversy over the concept of optimism. There are entire books written on optimism, and I'm not that into optimism. How does an optimism see this container? This is half full. And if you see it as half full, it might be good enough. But what's more important to me is that as an optimist, you might also expend your energy trying to fix problems that you actually have no control over. Real resilience during the worst of times, God forbid any of our children actually see the worst of times, but real resilience in the worst of times is about conserving energy. How does a pessimist see this container? Which means I can't even get on the playing field. Here's how I want your kids to see this. There is a container that is half filled with water. And you know what? I'm pretty thirsty. I need some more water now. Do you know where they have the bottles of water? Or, you know what? I'm not very thirsty. You know, I had a drink before I came in. This is good enough for me now. Thank you. A realistic assessment and a hopeful disposition. So again, if you ask my mother-in-law how you survive hell and figure out how to still be loving, here's what she said. 4'6", thick Yiddish accent, turning 90 in about a month, 2 months. You figure out what you can change and you fight like hell. You figure out what you can't change and you let it go, or you become the animals that they say you are. This is the lesson of oppression. You own the oppressor's ideas when you just keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting. You only fight what you can control, and you change that. On the walls of every recovery program in the country, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. This is resilience. Next, we want our kids to be able to have healthy bodies. If I had only 5 minutes with every kid in America, and I have a lot more with your kids, but this is the only point I would teach. To understand stress and to be able to manage it, exercise is the most important thing you can do. Why? We all come from the jungle. I'm sitting in my jungle chair right now. A tiger walks into the room. What do I have to do? I need to stand up and jump quickly. So what's the first feeling you have when you're stressed? You get butterflies, right? Do you know why you get butterflies? Where do I need the blood right now as I'm getting ready to jump? Not my heart. I need it in my butt, which is my jumping muscle, and my legs, which are my running muscle. So what are butterflies? That is the blood going whoosh. Isn't that cool? Then your heart beats fast. Why? So you can pump that blood. And then you sweat, so you can cool off while you're running. Your pupils get big. Why? So you can jump over the log while you are running and you don't fall down. You breathe fast. Why? So you can oxygenate that blood. You can't think clearly when you're stressed. Why? Because you're not supposed to turn the tiger and say, let me help you out. So when you have stress hormones going through your body, you are getting signals that there's a tiger chasing your butt. And when you exercise, then you run it off and you show your body anytime that this joint is moving, you say to your body, I've escaped from the tiger. When exercise is not part of your life and you are still nervous, then what happens is the adrenaline is going through your body and you believe the tiger is still lurking. It could be there, the tiger could be there, it could be there, it could be anywhere. That's what anxiety is. Anxiety is not knowing when you're going to get attacked under what condition. When you exercise, best book on this, so again, nicely summarized in my books. Remember, I'm not a primary researcher, well, a little bit. I'm a translator. Best book on this, if you have a kid with ADD, depression, or anxiety, you want the book Spark by Ratey, R-A-T-E-Y. Start with my stuff. If you want more, go to his stuff. This is so well proven. So we want kids to exercise. But suppose you can't exercise. Suppose a teacher comes to you and he hands you that history test. You can't say, excuse me, gotta run. So you also need to be able to transform your body into a relaxed state. So I'm going to also teach your kids this, but this is healthy for you. Kids, the science lesson continues. There are two nervous systems in your body. There is the voluntary system, which says walk, walk, talk, turn. There is the involuntary system, which says beat, breathe, digest. Within the involuntary system, there are two parallel systems. There's the I'm chillin' system, things are good, and there's a tiger chasing my butt system. Because they're parallel, only one can be on at a time. which means that if we could figure out how to flip the switch into turning on our relaxed system, then our nervous system goes away and we become calm. So let's return to that jungle chair and think about what that switch could be. It has to be something that I can change or something I can control. Can I choose to get the sweat back into my pits? Can't be the switch. Can I choose to get the blood back into my belly? Can't be the switch. Can I choose to slow down my heart rate? Can't be the switch. Can I choose to shrink my pupils? What can I do? I can breathe. So Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, Asian medicine, native indigenous medicine, it's all about breath. So now, this is what I showed your kids. Let's bring another kind of science into it. Let's bring the science of kinesiology into it, which is the position of my body and how it makes me feel. How do I take a test? You're talking to a guy who literally in chemistry, in the beginning of chemistry in college, was getting 17s on multiple choice tests with the lowest bottom average score being 20 if you randomly guessed. Because I would go completely blank and begin panicking as soon as I didn't know anything. How do you sit when you're nervous? You sit like this. Kinesthetically, what is your body communicating? I'm ready to jump. And what are your legs doing? What are you communicating? Why am I sitting still when there's a tiger chasing my ass? So when we learn to move our hips forward, stop shaking, open our legs a little bit, which is the universal male position for no tiger coming to me right now, okay? And then we breathe. And what is a good breath look like? Especially if you tell young men to take a deep breath, it looks like this. Because it's so darn sexy. But a real deep breath is a belly breath followed by a chest breath. The tidal volume, meaning the amount of air that you exchange, and your pleura, the skin around your lungs and what stretches, is overwhelming, and your parasympathetic or your I'm chillin' system gets turned on. That is the power of breath. So I was in the middle school today, and I'm with the teachers, and they said, yeah, the math department is particularly good at that because we always do deep breathing before testing. It's like, whoa. I mean, you guys know what you're doing. But I taught your kids that, about how to just sit there when no one's knowing and just do those breaths. It literally transforms your body. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip nutrition and I'm going to skip sleep, though those things are very important. And in the context of thinking about creating a healthy school environment, sleep is incredibly important. And the point I made to your kids is do not feel like staying up all night is ever a good idea, because you're just going to do badly the next day, not learn, increase anxiety, need more time for homework, get less sleep the next night. But what I want to talk about with you is managing stress. There are two categories. The first one is instant vacations. This is the drug prevention category. I want kids to be able to escape without using drugs. So what are the kind of things that help kids to escape without ever needing drugs? What do you think? A video game in the right context for a limited amount of time is a great example. Working on anything that you enjoy is a great example. One 8th grader today said you want them to find their happy place. And I wanted to go in the audience and pinch his cheek. It's like, oh, okay. But anything that lets you get away from it. Scientifically, the best thing is actually reading a book. Because when you read a book, then you have to do all the work. In video games, you don't have to do all the work, right? Stuff's handed to you, and it can get you hyped. In reading a book, you have to visualize the panorama, smell the smells, hear the sounds, and feel the feelings. And because of that, there is not room for your other emotions. But sometimes you want to do the really hard stuff. So let me tell you my nightmare for your kids. My nightmare for your kids is not that they are stressed. A little bit of stress is good in your life. It really is. It activates you. It gets you to perform very well. What I'm hoping, you've got a very special school here. Not only is it a school that is academically rigorous, it's also a school that's committed to social justice. Do you get that? I mean, that's amazing. So your kids are very likely, and I spent some time, we did a special talk with the Social Justice Club today. Your kids are positioned to really change the world because they are well-resourced, and God willing, they care about changing the world. So my nightmare for your kids is not that they're stressed. My nightmare is that they become numb because they will be exposed to pain, and we don't want them to suddenly shut themselves down. The perfect world, we'd have not 10 minutes left, we would have 2 weeks left. And I would work with each of you on your personal pain. In the less than perfect world, let me show you my life. I actually have had the best life of anybody I know, but let me just kind of give you an idea of what it's looked like. So I had this very happy life, and then I was 17, and I got, I went through this pretty serious depression. And after that, in recovery from that, I began really getting involved in social justice issues. I began living on Bridger, South Dakota with the Minnekoju Lakota people, and I saw devastation beyond belief and inspiration beyond measure. And then I went back to medical school, and I began working with homeless and street kids, and I saw things that are just unimaginable. And then I went to residency, and from the time I was a second-year resident until the time that I was, for 7 years, actually the day I didn't cry for 7 years. I didn't cry from the day that I had to go into a father's room and tell him that we had declared his 2 daughters brain dead and asked if he wanted to donate their organs. And he said to me, "Doctor, I need a couple hours to think about this. I just turned my wife off life support and from a car crash." It took me 7 years to cry again. And now I'm an adolescent doctor. I still see pain, but really what I see is victims of economic, social, and racial injustice, because that's most of what creates the pain that I see, and I'm pretty angry about it. I have to be honest with you about that. And now I'm this book author dude man guy who travels around the world teaching other people how to raise their kids while my own kids were growing up, right? So I was gone about a third of the time. And was I a great dad or a good enough dad? The answer is awesome. But you know who suffered? The person who suffered was my wife, because my wife, I would come home and she would be like, "Can we talk about it?" I was like, "Can we talk tomorrow? I'm exhausted." Like, I could always find the time for my kids and not for my wife. This is my life, and I've had the happiest life I know. My pain is that I bear witness to other people's pain. What do you see there? I know it's hard to see. It's really more of a metaphor. But it's chaos, right? If you've ever met anybody who just has a lot of chaos in their life and who doesn't put a container around the chaos, they're nuts. So what do? We build a container around the chaos under the belief that it will keep everything in safe. And then when something bad happens, we say, "I'm going to put it inside the container, really, and I'll deal with it later. Really, I will." But you don't, because, in the case of that father, I had to go and take care of someone else. And if I had processed my emotions, that wasn't going to be right. So what happens is we keep adding stuff in. So then what we do in exchange is we have to build thicker walls. Thicker and thicker walls, until this box becomes what I call a leaden container. Lead, too difficult to see through, too heavy to lift, and poison to your system. And when the most passionate themes of human existence are trapped inside of a leaden box, you stop feeling. That is your nightmare for your kids. And then every once in a while, someone opens up your lid and outpours rage. This is your nightmare, that you send your kids to a school like this that prepares them to do social justice, that you've invested an enormous amount in them, and then when they go out there, they become numb because it's too overwhelming because of the issues in their life. Oh, and by the way, if you want your head to stop spinning because you've got a lot of stuff going on, then what I suggest you do is smoke marijuana. And by the way, if you want control over your emotions so that you can be in charge of when they come out, then drink alcohol. So if you understand this, you also understand why people use substances. So if you want to prevent this, you ask for people to become emotionally intelligent so they do not have to medicate away their emotions that they are trapped. So a better way is to create what I call a Tupperware box, right? Tupperware. It is still a container, but the stuff inside, it don't stink. Tupperware. You know what is inside, and you have gone through the process of naming those things through emotional intelligence. Best emotional intelligence book for those of you who have kids in middle school or less is Goleman, Goleman. This is all on my website in terms of the references. But you know what's inside. This is Luis from the streets of New York. This is Dorothy from South Dakota. This is that father. This is other issues in my own life or father's issues. I know what's there. It's not chaotic. It's not spinning. I've gone through the process of emotional intelligence. I will choose, because it's a Tupperware container. I'm not going to eat it all at one time. I'm going to open the lid. I'm going to choose to take out one portion. I'm going to remove it using my emotional tools, and then I'm going to burp the box safely closed. What do my emotional tools look like? They look like prayer. They look like talking to someone who's earned your trust. They look like laughter, right? You know how today I made you laugh every few minutes? I'm not funny. Like, humor is not something important to me. But I gave you an incredibly hard-hitting talk. And if we didn't break it up a little bit, you couldn't have managed it. That's what people do, all right? Talking to someone who's earned your own trust, writing things out, music, art, dance, not to build your college resume, but so that you have the power and the ability to express yourselves later in life. I work with homeless and street kids. Other doctors numb their feelings by giving them medicine. I do rarely when they're in danger. But what I do commonly is give out art books and composition books. Because if you can express yourself, then you are not going to shut down, nor are you going to explode. You've got to help kids develop this Tupperware box concept. And furthermore, check that out. Do you see that that's an upside-down mountain? It's an upside-down mountain divided into hills. This is one of the techniques. Life is chaotic. It's crazy. But if you know what the hills are, you can traverse the journey. Next, contributing to the world, the Tikkun Olam piece. I do want your kids contributing. I do not want you sending them to Botswana for 10 days. I want you to go into Minneapolis and see who needs service. I want them to help the old lady shovel snow because I want them to be doing it sincerely. I want them to be surrounded by thank yous rather than condemnation. I want them to understand the power and the good that it feels to serve other human beings, because that will allow them to take without shame or stigma. Now, you can listen to everything I've said, and your tolerance is still going to reach its limits at times, because you're human, all right? So what are you going to do? You're going to fall back in love with your kid, all right? And that means you're going to change what you consider high yield with your child. If you believe high yield is about talking about sex and drugs and academics, then you're messing up. High yield is loving who they are. That same kid who used to run up the street and say, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home, Daddy's home." I want you to see that in your 16-year-old. Because when you see it and he is seen and he is known, that is the most protective force in his life. You know all those studies of, like, have dinner with your child? It's not about dinner. It's about human connection. It's about human connection in low-pressure settings. Next, so catch your kid being good. Hold them to the highest expectation in terms of who they are. And part of teaching them how to be a 35-year-old, 40-year-old, and 50-year-old is stop being so child-centered. Love your spouse or your lover. Show them how, assuming you don't have a spouse actually, but show them what it means to be an incredibly caring adult. Okay? What's the greatest gift you can give your child? Guys, we have a very messed up generation our age. So I'm older than most of you, but not all of you. We had very, very clear gender roles, and I do not want to go back to those days. But my father spoke all over the world. I didn't see him very much. He wasn't, like, incredibly warm or engaged, but he was a man, and that was okay. My mother didn't work, but she was incredibly loving and available. Okay, well, it didn't work outside the home. And I wanted to grow up to be more like my mother, right? But I also speak around the world, and it's very, very hard because the men want to be to me, I dream of a world, honestly, in which the pinnacle of masculinity is loving your child. That's the perfect world, is when we get there, right? But we still feel guilty because we still are supposed to be major breadwinners. Women, if you don't work, then you are not modeling for your child how to be a strong woman in modern society. If you do work, then you're not spending enough time with your kids. We're crazy. We're unhappy. We feel guilty. And because of that, we end up sacrificing our own lives to be able to give everything that we can to our children. All right? And we are so child-focused that we're not living our adult lives. That is not the way to model how to be a healthy 35 or 40-year-old. We try to bring the levels of efficiency. People are in work. We try to bring the levels of efficiency that we learn in work to our home, which is why high yield is now about academics. What is the product that I am producing? Stop. It's not healthy. It's based on pathology. It's based on our own insecurity about the generation that we're in. Stop. Love your child for who they are. There is nothing you're going to do that is going to produce that child success more than that. Next, the greatest gift you can give your child is to care for yourself, seriously. There's metaphor after metaphor. There's put on your own oxygen mask. There's the heart pumps blood to itself. But the bottom line is that kids, and you know this, especially the people who have the 2-year-olds, you know that during the worst of a time, the kid looks at you and makes sure you're okay. And if you're okay, they're okay, right? It's still true during adolescence. If I could just say to you, take care of yourself because you deserve to, because you're a human being and you deserve to be happy, I would pull that angle. But you wouldn't listen to me. What I'm telling you is that it is a strategic act of good parenting. It is a strategic act of building your child to be a healthy adult when you model for them what it looks like to be a healthy adult. Thank you, guys. So, thank you. Thank you. I am happy to, so it's 9 o'clock. I expect a bunch of people to leave, but I'm also happy to stay for 15 minutes for questions. Here are the rules about questions. The rules about questions is you may not say, this is my child's problem, because your kids will hate you because it's a closed community. But any general questions? Yes.
When you say that if a child's not naturally good at something like, say, math, to let it go, but where's the line between creating high expectations and holding them to that and letting them be who they are?
Right. So remember, the expectations are about who they are, not about their performance. Now, math is an example where you can't just let it go entirely. You need to be able to be good enough to be able to exist in society, right? But you also can't be freaked out that it's not your natural subject. But like physics, not my natural subject. I think it's really interesting to the extent that you can tell my grandma about it. I think it's really interesting. I can go to a friend's house who's an engineer and understand that he doesn't drive a choo-choo train. Do you know what I mean? I know enough to be able to exist in society. So when I say let it go, I'm not naive enough to say, don't take math, darling. What I am saying is, don't freak out about the fact that you're not naturally good at it. You're learning about it. You're learning about yourself. I have one of my daughter's boyfriends, is he an environmental engineer or an environmental scientist? And he's not sure. Well, this year, he understood how much he didn't like calculus. And I said, this is great data for you. You now know you're an environmental scientist and not an environmental engineer. This is great. This is how we sharpen our spikes. Next. Would you be able to talk loudly? So there's a huge amount of data on that, okay? And what is clear is that we should do it the opposite of how most people do it. Your teenagers should be the last people coming into school. The circadian rhythm of teenagers, so I believe that teenagers are our biologic night watchmen. Think about it. They stay up late. They are most energized late. They're foolish when they're in groups. I believe that they are designed to keep our villages safe when the rest of us are sleeping. And that their circadian rhythm, we know scientifically, really changes. So we know that in school districts that have made it so that the little kids come in first and the teenagers come in last, that grades go up, anxiety goes down, everything. We know that. We also know that first class period exercise, hard, vigorous exercise, anxiety goes down, depression goes down, violence goes down, grades go up. Those are things we scientifically know, but that people are not putting into place. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Just try your best. So the just try your best is misinterpreted by kids as, and I know that if you do, you'll get straight A's. It's the whole paragraph, which is not as catchy. But darling, I expect you to work very hard, and I want you to pay attention to the results. And do you remember that whole paragraph? That's what you should say. But it's not a sit-down. It's a whole way of being and an occasional sit-down. But just try your best is absolutely misinterpreted by kids. Right. You've prepared yourself. Trust yourself. You know, and don't forget about those deep breaths. Okay? And you know what? I love you. I'm going to love you at the end of the day no matter what. Okay? All right. Other questions, thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
Skeptical about positive psychology?
So there are many aspects of positive psychology. The question is, am I skeptical about positive psychology? There are many aspects of positive psychology that I love. I'm at Penn. Positive psychology is rooted at Penn. Are you a positive psychologist? I just want to know where you're coming from. Just how diplomatic I had to be. So I love many aspects. I love grit. I love Angela Duckworth. I think Marty Seligman has changed the world in terms of how we think about things. I would like positive psychology a lot better if it didn't call itself resilience and if it stuck to positive psychology. As a resilience guy, resilience is about context, not just how you think. Positive psychology says how you think will change the world. And it is true that positive psychology will be a part of what changes the world. Like in my book, the Building Resilience book, which is kind of the broad overview from the Academy on Resilience, it's one chapter. The rest of it is how we parent, how we think, social context, environmental context. So that's one problem I have, is just the label. The only problem I have is with the concept of optimism. I think that life is more complicated than if I will it, good things will happen. So positive psychology has an incredible role. I think they've contributed tremendously, and I think it stops before we can make it so that all kids can be resilient through difficult times. It's more than how you think. It is the fact that sometimes bad things really happen to you, and when they do, you've got to conserve your energy and not think your way out of it. How's that? Okay? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well, so I don't know your son, but I have goosebumps. Verify that? I have goosebumps. You heard the whole message. I don't know your son. I invited them to tell them to have their parents come if they thought it would benefit their parents. Maybe it's that your son is anxious. Maybe it's that your son feels pressured. Maybe it's that your son, this was a way of him saying to you, see me as more than what I produce. I don't know. Here's what I do know. I know that your relationship with your son is good enough that he thinks you're approachable. That I know. What he was asking you to see, I can't tell you because he wasn't there. You saw it. So what I didn't tell them is the tricks of parenting. What the talk was today was about perfectionism, about the importance of making mistakes, about not getting down on yourself when you do make a mistake because you're more likely to be successful, and to not listen to the messages that narrowly define success for you. Find yourself. That was number one. Number two was all the stress stuff. I'm guessing that the stress stuff is not what he wanted you to be here for. In my experience, having done this many, many times, the kids hear the stress stuff, but they tell the parents to come in the room because they're trying to say to you, I'm anxious, and a little bit you could help me if you listen to this guy. That's my experience. Okay? Erin, where is Erin? She's selling books. Okay. Because she was here in a minute, because I'd love her to answer that question as well as the counselor. Yes, sir.
What do you say when your 7-year-old daughter talks about retirement?
When your 7-year-old daughter?
Talks about retirement. Because my mother-in-law is retiring, and she wants to talk about it, and I shut her down because, life is so long, still at least for her. So, she says, Dad, when am I going to retire? I'm working 5 days a week.
So the answer is, I don't know, but what I do know is you never shut her down. right? So she is saying something. It could be funny. It could be she's saying, I'm incredibly stressed. When is this going to stop? So rather than saying you have a long life, say a general statement of empathy like, yeah, sometimes it does feel like it would be nice to just retire. Do you feel like that? Why? That makes me feel like you might feel like you're working too hard right now. Tell me more about that. That's the way to go. Because just like your son invited you by saying, listen to the funny-looking little man tonight, your daughter is floating a trial balloon. That's what I would call a trial balloon. Dad, I really would like to retire. Saying, no, you don't, is not the way to go, with all due love and respect to you. The way to go is by saying, what makes you say that? When I think about retirement, it's because I've been working too much. You feel like that? I have a feeling, boom, you're going to learn a lot about your daughter if you do that. Yes, sir. Right. So I think I covered it, or I tried to cover it a lot, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to notice what they're great at, notice their limitations, and make them feel safe in those limitations where they're not feeling judged. If it feels like a judgment, then it's going to be a problem. But you bring me up, speaking of positive psychology, you've given me the opportunity to say something that I had forgotten to say. Positive psychology is largely rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is awesome. So first thing you do is, in a preventive way, you try to deal with all of the things that I said, and you try to do it at home. You change how your kid's thinking as best you can. But then if that's not working, let me tell you what's happening in anxious people's heads. They are hearing words, and the words that they're hearing is, I should do this, I better do this, if I don't do this, then. It's a lot of I must, I shoulds. So if you're giving feedback to a kid, and they're not able to hear, like a loving man like you, give feedback without feeling like they're attacked, it is entirely possible, with all due respect, as an outstanding educator, that you're dealing with something deeper than what you can fix. If you've done the non-judgment, you've celebrated unevenness, you've congratulated failure, you've invited stretching, and the kid is just dying every time you give feedback, then a voice is playing in her head. And the voice is, I should, I better, if I don't. That is what cognitive behavioral therapy is for. It catches the voices, and that is where Seligman has contributed to the world. Well, actually, it's Beck. But that whole Penn psychology thing has contributed to the world enormously by having us turn off the tapes in our head and replace it. Okay? So you do everything I said, but now, here is what I beg you. You are a child development specialist. And at schools like this, and I say this with as much respect as I can to you, but when you have parents who, are fairly well resourced, sometimes you forget to notice that your teachers are brilliant and that your teachers are child development specialists who are spending time with your kids. So what I would love is for you to be able to say to the parents of that child, I am worried that when I give her feedback, she is much tougher on herself than she should be, no matter how I choose to deliver the feedback. And I think she would benefit from what's called some cognitive restructuring, just so that she can hear things without feeling like she's being attacked. And when that happens, don't say, oh my God, there's something wrong with my child. Say, what an amazing opportunity to shape my child's happiness far into the future by attacking it now. Yes, ma'am. So I have no idea. Seriously, I've been in Minneapolis for about 12 hours now. Oh, okay. So Erin, I can tell you, I wish she was in the room, I can tell you that I am it's actually easier to say this without her being in the room. I am so impressed with her. Like, I'm walking around, I see how she interacts with kids, I see her spirit. She is amazing, okay? So she should know what the resources are. I happen to come from Philadelphia, which has the highest concentration of cognitive behavioral people on the planet, because we invented it, because Aaron Beck, but it is widely studied and more effective with anxiety and depression than anything else, and perfectionism. Okay? Room for one more question, if there is one more. Yes, ma'am. Right. So this is, well, your teachers are trained on Dweck at this school. So your teachers should know how to do this. Let me back up. I want to do one thing before this to get back to your question. Aaron, oh, God, we were just complaining about you. So the point is that how are you going to say that someone should see Aaron? If you say to your child, I am worried about you and I need you to see the counselor, then you have created stigma. Instead, you say, I love you so much, and sometimes it seems like you're feeling uncomfortable, and you deserve to be happier. You've got so much to bring to the world, and I hate the fact that you're tough on yourself. I think you deserve to. Change it from need to deserve, and that's key. Now, back to your question. So that's the million-dollar question, right? So, you know, I know exactly what needs to happen to fix the world, but I don't know how to change all of society. So, you know, this is, the teachers think that the parents create the problem. The parents think the schools create the problem. Everybody thinks college admissions creates the problems, which is actually, that's the part that's true. Okay, it really is. We have to get off the treadmill together. So let's look at what's happening in the last, in the 2 days that I'm going to be here. I've spoken to your kids. We know at least one case of a kid who said, Mom, go tonight. You're going to know me better. I cannot think of a better gift than you're going to know me better if you go tonight. Wow, that's amazing. So I've spoken to the kids. I'm speaking to the teachers tomorrow in an hour-and-a-half talk. I'm speaking to various administrators. We've spoken to different parents. All that we can do is change this community, not the outside world. But you can also change what success is in this community. If you make it so that at the end of senior year, you really, really are not more impressed with the kid who went to Stanford than the kid, or Penn, than the kid who goes to UM, if you really, really can pull that off, you'll make it so everybody can succeed. But as long, and you can change your society, your culture. And honestly, they'll be better off. And the beginning of changing your culture is, if I had to pick a mantra, it's, I want to see discussions be, what are we doing to make sure he's healthy when he's 35? You know, the other mantra I'm eager to spread is Lighthouse Parenting. Not because I need a brand, but because I have to kill the other brands, because they're dangerous. And this is a brand that actually is about seeing kids be healthy when they're 35. So my big answer is, gosh, I don't know. But we do one school at a time, one community at a time. You know, and so a place like Blake, if I understand Blake, this is like the IT school in Minnesota, or in, at least in Minneapolis, right? So if you make a decision to do something as a school, which, by the way, you already have, then nobody's going to be judging you, because everybody knows that kids here get excellent educations. You just have to stop being so anxious about it. All right? Thanks, guys. Have a great night.